In the small, peaceful village of Umedike, life was simple and predictable. The villagers, who lived off the land and maintained close-knit relationships, rarely experienced anything out of the ordinary. But one day, the arrival of a stranger changed everything. The sun was setting when the villagers first saw him. He appeared out of nowhere, a tall figure wrapped in a dark cloak, with a wide-brimmed hat that obscured his face. He walked slowly through the village, his steps measured and deliberate. Children playing in the square stopped to stare, while the elders exchanged wary glances. Who was this man, and what did he want? The stranger spoke to no one, his silence only deepening the mystery. He made his way to the village inn, where he requested a room for the night. The innkeeper, a burly man named Namdi, hesitated but eventually agreed. The stranger paid in gold coins, further fueling the curiosity and suspicion of the villagers. As night fell, the village was abuzz with speculation. Some believed the stranger was a wealthy trader from distant lands, others whispered that he might be a fugitive or worse, a bringer of bad omens. But no one knew for sure. What they did know was that his arrival marked the beginning of something that would change their lives forever. The next morning, the village gathered outside the inn, eager to learn more about the mysterious stranger. Namdi, the innkeeper, emerged looking slightly unnerved but resolute. He informed the crowd that the stranger had requested a private audience with the village chief. Chief Obina, a wise and respected leader, agreed to meet the stranger in the village square, where all could witness the exchange. The villagers held their breath as the stranger stepped forward. He introduced himself as Kaito, a traveler from a distant land. His voice was deep and calm, with an accent that hinted at faraway places. Kaito explained that he was on a journey to find a place where he could settle and share his knowledge. He claimed to possess unique skills in healing, agriculture, and construction, abilities that could benefit the village. However, he was vague about his past and the reasons for his travels. Chief Obina, always cautious, asked the stranger what he sought in return. Kaito smiled mysteriously and replied that he only desired a place to call home, a community where he could live in peace. His answer seemed sincere, but there was something about him that kept the villagers on edge. The chief agreed to allow Kaito to stay, on the condition that he prove his worth to the village. The villagers, though still wary, were intrigued. What could this stranger offer, and what secrets might he be hiding? A few days after Kaito's arrival, a young woman named Akwago fell gravely ill. She was the daughter of one of the village elders, and her condition deteriorated rapidly. The village healer, an elderly woman named Adana, tried every remedy she knew, but nothing seemed to work. Desperate, Akwago's father approached Kaito, asking if he could help. Kaito agreed without hesitation. He entered Akwago's hut, where she lay pale and feverish. The villagers gathered outside, anxious and hopeful. Kaito spent hours inside the hut, performing rituals that no one had seen before. He mixed herbs, chanted in a foreign tongue, and placed his hands over Akwago's body, as if channeling some unseen energy. The air in the hut grew thick with a strange, soothing scent. When Kaito finally emerged, he looked exhausted but satisfied. He announced that Akwago would recover by morning. Skeptical but desperate, the villagers waited through the night. True to his word, Akwago awoke the next day, her fever broken, and her strength returning. The villagers were astonished. Adana, the village healer, was both relieved and perplexed, for she had never seen such a rapid recovery. News of the miracle spread quickly, and Kaito's reputation began to grow. The villagers, once suspicious, now started to believe that the stranger might indeed be a blessing. But even as they praised him, questions about his true nature lingered in the back of their minds. As the weeks passed, Kaito continued to prove his worth to the village. His next contribution came during the harvest season. The villagers had been facing declining crop yields for several years, and this year's harvest was expected to be particularly poor. Kaito offered to help, suggesting that he could use his knowledge to increase the yield. The villagers, remembering his success with Akwogo, agreed to let him try. Kaito spent several days studying the fields, examining the soil, and selecting specific herbs and plants. He performed rituals in the field at dawn and dusk, spreading a special mixture of herbs and chanting in his mysterious language. The villagers watched from a distance, curious but unsure of what to expect. When the time came to harvest, the villagers were astonished to find that their fields were more bountiful than they had been in decades. The crops were healthy, vibrant, and abundant. The villagers celebrated their good fortune, praising Kaito for his miraculous intervention. Chief Obinna, impressed by the stranger's abilities, began to trust him more, allowing him to take on more responsibilities in the village. Kaito's influence grew, and he became an integral part of the community. Yet, some villagers remained wary, sensing that there was still much they did not know about him. With each passing day, Kaito's influence in Umidai grew. His knowledge and skills seemed limitless, and the villagers began to seek his counsel on matters beyond healing and agriculture. He advised them on construction projects, helped resolve disputes, and even taught the children new ways of thinking and problem solving. The village council, traditionally a close-knit group of elders, found themselves increasingly reliant on Kaito's guidance. Some of the younger council members, particularly those who had benefited from Kaito's teachings, began to advocate for him to have an official role in the council. Chief Obinna, though still respectful of tradition, recognized the value Kaito brought to the village. He proposed that Kaito be made an honorary member of the council, a move that was met with both support and opposition. The council meeting to discuss this proposal was tense. Elder Adana, the village healer, expressed her concerns. She acknowledged Kaito's contributions but warned that they still knew little about his past or his true intentions. She urged caution, reminding the council that the village's strength lay in its traditions and unity. Others argued that Kaito had proven his loyalty and deserved a place among the village's leaders. The debate lasted late into the night, with the council ultimately deciding to offer Kaito a place on the council, though with certain conditions to ensure transparency. Kaito accepted the offer with humility, but a faint smile hinted at deeper ambitions. The decision marked a turning point for the village, one that would have far-reaching consequences. As Kaito's influence grew, so did the curiosity of those who remained suspicious of him. Elder Adana, in particular, could not shake the feeling that there was more to Kaito than met the eye. She decided to investigate further, enlisting the help of her granddaughter, Ifunanya, who was known for her keen intuition and resourcefulness. One evening, while the village was busy with preparations for a festival, Ifunanya slipped away to Kaito's hut. She had noticed that Kaito spent a lot of time alone in his hut, often late into the night. She approached the hut cautiously, making sure no one was watching. The door was slightly ajar, and she could see a faint light flickering from within. Ifunanya's heart pounded as she stepped inside. The interior of the hut was unlike anything she had expected. Shelves lined the walls, filled with strange artifacts, jars of unknown substances, and books written in languages she couldn't recognize. In the center of the room was a small altar, adorned with symbols that seemed both ancient and foreign. As she moved further in, Ifunanya noticed a trapdoor partially hidden beneath a woven mat. Her curiosity got the better of her, and she carefully lifted the mat to reveal a wooden hatch. It creaked as she opened it, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Ifunanya hesitated for a moment, but her determination to uncover the truth pushed her forward. She descended the stairs, her hand brushing against the cold stone walls for balance. At the bottom, she found herself in a dimly lit chamber, its walls covered in intricate carvings and symbols that pulsed with a strange energy. In the center of the chamber was a large stone table, upon which lay a variety of objects, charms, bones, and what appeared to be a map. Ifunanya's eyes widened as she realized that the map depicted not just Umidike, but several other villages in the region. As she studied the map, she heard a noise behind her. Turning quickly, she saw Kaito standing at the top of the stairs, his expression unreadable. He slowly descended, the flickering light casting eerie shadows on the walls. Ifunanya's heart raced, but she stood her ground, determined to confront him. Kaito approached the table and placed a hand on the map. He looked at Ifunanya, his eyes piercing through the dim light. "You've come seeking answers," he said softly. "And answers you shall have." Kaito began to explain, his voice calm but carrying the weight of deep secrets. He revealed that he was no ordinary traveler. Kaito was a guardian, part of an ancient order dedicated to protecting the balance of the world. His journey had brought him to Umidike because he sensed a disturbance in the natural order, something that threatened not just the village, but the entire region. The artifacts and symbols in the chamber were tools of his trade, meant to detect and neutralize these disturbances. The map, he explained, showed the locations of other villages where similar issues had arisen. Kaito had been traveling from village to village, offering his help in restoring balance. But there was more. Kaito confessed that he had sensed a great power within Umidike, one that could either protect or destroy. This power, he believed, was connected to the village's ancestors, whose spirits still watched over the land. He had come to Umidike not only to help the villagers but also to protect this power from those who would misuse it. Ifunanya listened in stunned silence. The revelations were overwhelming, but they also answered many of the questions that had been plaguing her and the other villagers. She realized that Kaito's intentions, though mysterious, were not malevolent. He was here to protect them, not to harm them. However, Kaito also warned that there were others who sought to exploit the power in Umidike for their own gain. These forces were already in motion, and the village would soon face a great trial. Kaito offered his help, but he made it clear that the villagers would need to stand together if they were to overcome what was coming. Ifunanya knew she had to share this information with the rest of the village, but she also understood that the decision of whether to trust Kaito rested with the village council. She left the chamber with a heavy heart, knowing that the fate of Umidike hung in the balance. The next morning, Ifunanya approached Elder Adana with what she had learned. Adana, though wary, recognized the importance of the revelations and called an emergency meeting of the village council. The elders gathered in the council hut, their faces etched with concern as Ifunanya recounted her encounter with Kaito and the secrets she had uncovered. The council was divided. Some elders, like Adana, were cautious, unsure whether to fully trust Kaito despite the evidence of his good intentions. Others, particularly those who had benefited from Kaito's skills, argued that they had little choice but to accept his help, given the potential threat to the village. Chief Obina, as the leader, listened carefully to both sides. He understood the fears of the cautious elders but also recognized that the village had already benefited greatly from Kaito's presence. The decision before them was not an easy one. Trusting Kaito meant putting the fate of the village in the hands of an outsider, but rejecting him could leave them vulnerable to the dangers he had warned about. After hours of deliberation, Chief Obina finally spoke. He proposed a compromise. The village would accept Kaito's help, but with strict oversight by the council. Kaito would be required to share his knowledge and plans with the council and involve them in any decisions that affected the village. This way, they could maintain some control while benefiting from his expertise. The council agreed to this compromise, though not without reservations. They summoned Kaito to inform him of their decision. Kaito, ever composed, accepted the terms without hesitation. He assured the council that his only goal was to protect the village and its people. As the meeting adjourned, there was a sense of unease in the air. The council had made their decision, but the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty. The villagers would need to place their faith in Kaito, even as they remained vigilant for any signs of betrayal. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in Umudike grew increasingly tense. The villagers went about their daily tasks, but there was an undercurrent of anxiety that was impossible to ignore. The elders, now more cautious than ever, kept a close watch on Kaito, even as they continued to seek his guidance. It wasn't long before the first signs of trouble began to appear. Strange occurrences started to plague the village. Livestock fell ill for no apparent reason, crops withered overnight, and the river that provided water for the village began to run muddy and foul. The villagers were quick to attribute these events to the dark forces Kaito had warned about. Panic began to spread, with some villagers questioning whether allowing Kaito into their midst had brought this curse upon them. Others argued that these events were precisely why they needed Kaito's help. Kaito himself remained calm, but there was a noticeable tension in his demeanor. He spent long hours consulting his artifacts and maps, searching for answers. He assured the villagers that he was doing everything in his power to protect them, but the uncertainty in his voice did little to quell their fears. Chief Obinna and the council called another meeting, this time inviting the entire village to attend. The mood was somber as the villagers gathered in the square, their faces reflecting their worry and confusion. Chief Obinna addressed the crowd, acknowledging the strange events and the fear they had caused. Kaito then stepped forward, his voice steady as he explained that the disturbances were a sign that the forces seeking to exploit Umudike's power were growing stronger. He urged the villagers to stand firm and trust in the protective rituals he would perform to counter these forces. Despite his words, the tension in the village only deepened. The villagers were caught in a web of fear and uncertainty, torn between their hope that Kaito could save them and their dread of what might happen if he failed. The night of the full moon arrived, the night when Kaito had planned to perform a powerful ritual to protect the village from the dark forces closing in. The villagers, despite their fears, gathered around the sacred grove at the edge of the village, where the ritual would take place. The air was thick with anticipation, and the only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the distant calls of nocturnal animals. The full moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie silver light over the gathering. Kaito stood in the center of the grove, surrounded by a circle of ancient stones that had been there for generations. The stones were said to be infused with the spirit of the ancestors, and tonight, they would serve as the focal point for the ritual. Kaito had prepared for this moment meticulously, gathering rare herbs and crafting intricate charms that now hung from the branches of the trees. The villagers watched in silence as Kaito began the ritual. He moved gracefully, his hands tracing patterns in the air as he chanted in a language that was both unfamiliar and ancient. The flames of the torches around the grove flickered in response, as if they were alive, dancing to the rhythm of his voice. As the ritual progressed, the atmosphere grew more intense. The air crackled with energy, and a soft, almost imperceptible hum filled the grove. The villagers could feel a presence, something powerful and otherworldly, as if the spirits of the ancestors were indeed watching over them. Kaito reached the climax of the ritual, raising his arms to the sky as he called upon the ancestors to protect the village. The ground beneath the villagers' feet seemed to vibrate, and a sudden gust of wind swept through the grove, extinguishing the torches and plunging the scene into darkness. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, slowly, the moonlight began to brighten, illuminating the grove with an ethereal glow. The villagers gasped as they saw the stones pulsing with a soft light, a sign that the spirits had heard Kaito's plea. Kaito lowered his arms, breathing heavily but looking satisfied. He assured the villagers that the ritual had been successful and that the village was now under the protection of the ancestors. The villagers, though still uneasy, began to feel a sense of relief. They offered their thanks to Kaito, hoping that the worst was now behind them. As the villagers dispersed, returning to their homes, Kaito remained in the grove, his gaze fixed on the stones. He knew that the battle was far from over. The ritual had bought them time, but the forces he had sensed were growing stronger. The final confrontation was inevitable, and Kaito could only hope that when the time came, the village would be ready. In the days following the ritual, the village of Umudike seemed to return to normal. The strange occurrences that had plagued the village began to subside, and the villagers felt a renewed sense of hope. The river cleared, the livestock recovered, and the crops regained their vitality. It was as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders. Chief Obinna and the elders expressed their gratitude to Kaito, who continued to advise the council and help the villagers with their daily tasks. Kaito's reputation soared, and many began to see him as a true guardian sent by the ancestors to protect them. However, not everyone was convinced. Ifeanyi, who had witnessed the hidden chamber and heard Kaito's revelations, couldn't shake the feeling that something was still amiss. She noticed that Kaito often disappeared for long periods, returning with a distant look in his eyes. She also sensed a growing unease among the elders, who, despite their public support, seemed increasingly wary of Kaito's influence. Elder Adana, in particular, was troubled. She had always trusted her instincts, and they were telling her that the village was not yet out of danger. She continued to monitor Kaito's actions closely, even as she participated in the village's efforts to rebuild and strengthen their defenses. Meanwhile, Kaito himself was not idle. He spent long hours in the grove, performing smaller rituals and preparing for the challenges he knew were still to come. He could feel the dark forces lurking on the edges of the village, waiting for the right moment to strike. The peace they were experiencing was only a temporary reprieve. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Kaito stood at the edge of the village, looking out into the surrounding forest. He could sense the presence of something powerful, something that had been watching them all along. It was only a matter of time before it revealed itself. Kaito turned back toward the village, his expression grim. He knew that the villagers were placing their trust in him, but he also knew that trust alone would not be enough to protect them from what was coming. The storm was on the horizon, and when it hit, it would test the village's strength and unity like never before. The night the storm arrived was one that the villagers of Umudike would never forget. It began with a sudden drop in temperature, a chilling wind that swept through the village, extinguishing fires and slamming doors shut. The sky, once clear, turned pitch black, with no moon or stars to provide light. Kaito, sensing the imminent danger, rushed to the village square, where Chief Obinna and the elders had already gathered. The villagers, frightened by the sudden change in the weather, began to emerge from their homes, seeking answers and protection. Before anyone could react, the attack began. Dark figures, shadowy and indistinct, emerged from the forest, moving with unnatural speed and precision. These were not ordinary enemies, they were manifestations of the dark forces Kaito had warned about, beings of pure malevolence that fed on fear and chaos. The villagers scrambled to defend themselves, but they were no match for the attackers. The shadowy figures moved through the village like a plague, causing destruction wherever they went. Livestock were slaughtered, homes were set ablaze, and those who tried to fight were overwhelmed by the sheer power of the dark forces. Kaito knew that this was the moment he had been preparing for. He called upon the protective spells and charms he had placed around the village, activating them with a burst of energy that caused the ground to tremble. The ancient stones in the grove began to glow with a fierce light, creating a barrier that slowed the progress of the attackers. But the dark forces were relentless. They pressed against the barrier, testing its strength, looking for any weakness they could exploit. The villagers, now gathered in the square, watched in terror as the shadowy figures closed in, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Chief Obinna, realizing the gravity of the situation, ordered the villagers to take shelter in the council hut, which had been reinforced as a last line of defense. Kaito remained outside, standing at the center of the village, chanting and channeling his energy into the barrier. As the night wore on, the battle between light and darkness intensified. The villagers could feel the strain on the barrier, as if it was a living thing, struggling to hold back the tide of evil. Kaito, too, was beginning to falter, his strength waning as he poured everything he had into protecting the village. In the midst of the chaos, Ifunanya and Elder Adana, who had refused to take shelter, joined Kaito in the square. Adana brought with her a relic passed down through generations, a staff imbued with the power of the ancestors. She handed it to Kaito, knowing that it was their last hope. With the staff in hand, Kaito felt a surge of energy, a connection to the ancestors that renewed his strength. He raised the staff high, calling upon the spirits of the land to aid them in their darkest hour. The staff pulsed with light, and the barrier around the village blazed with a brilliance that momentarily blinded the attackers. For a brief, shining moment, it seemed as if the village would be saved. But then, in the heart of the storm, a new figure appeared, a towering presence cloaked in shadow, more powerful and terrifying than anything they had faced before. This was the true source of the dark forces, the entity that had been orchestrating the attacks. The villagers watched in horror as the figure approached the barrier, its very presence causing the ground to shake. Kaito knew that this was the final challenge, the ultimate test of his strength and the village's resolve. The towering figure of darkness loomed over the village, its form shifting and pulsing with an energy that seemed to drain the very life from the air. This was the Shadow King, the malevolent force behind the attacks, and its presence struck terror into the hearts of the villagers. Even the bravest among them could feel the overwhelming power of this entity, and many feared that their end was near. Kaito stood at the center of the village square, the glowing staff of the ancestors in his hands. He could feel the weight of the Shadow King's presence pressing down on him, but he also felt the strength of the spirits coursing through the staff, giving him the power to stand firm. The Shadow King approached the barrier, its dark form rippling like smoke. It raised a hand, and with a simple gesture, cracks began to form in the protective barrier surrounding the village. Kaito gripped the staff tighter, pouring his energy into repairing the cracks, but he knew that the barrier wouldn't hold for long. The villagers, huddled in the council hut, watched in horror as the barrier began to falter. Chief Obina, his face grim, turned to Ifunanya and Elder Adana. "This is our last stand," he said quietly. "If we fall here, there will be nothing left." Ifunanya, her heart pounding, looked out at Kaito. She knew that they couldn't leave him to face the Shadow King alone. Summoning her courage, she stepped forward, ready to join the fight. Elder Adana, seeing the determination in Ifunanya's eyes, nodded in agreement. "We must stand together," she said. "The ancestors will guide us." Kaito, sensing the presence of Ifunanya and Adana behind him, turned his head slightly. "This battle is not just mine," he said, his voice calm despite the danger. "The strength of this village, the strength of the ancestors, must unite if we are to defeat this darkness." With a shared resolve, Ifunanya, Adana, and Kaito faced the Shadow King. The air around them crackled with energy as the Shadow King unleashed a wave of dark magic, intent on shattering the barrier and consuming the village. But Kaito, bolstered by the power of the staff and the courage of his allies, met the attack head-on. A beam of pure light shot from the staff, colliding with the dark magic in a dazzling explosion of power. The ground shook as the two forces clashed, and for a moment, it seemed as though the light and darkness were evenly matched. But the Shadow King was relentless, pushing harder, determined to overwhelm them. Kaito gritted his teeth, feeling the strain of the battle. The light from the staff began to flicker, and the barrier continued to weaken. But just as it seemed that the darkness would prevail, Ifunanya and Adana joined hands with Kaito, their combined will adding to the strength of the light. The staff blazed with renewed brilliance, and the beam of light intensified, driving back the darkness. The Shadow King roared in fury, its form riding as it struggled against the power of the ancestors. The villagers, watching from the safety of the council hut, began to chant prayers to the ancestors, their voices rising in unison. The sound of the villagers' prayers filled the air, adding to the strength of the light. The Shadow King, sensing that it was losing ground, unleashed one final, desperate attack, pouring all its remaining energy into a massive wave of darkness. But Kaito, Ifunanya, and Adana, with the power of the ancestors and the support of the village behind them, held their ground. The wave of darkness crashed against the light, but this time, it was the light that prevailed. The staff fled with a blinding radiance, and the Shadow King let out a deafening scream as its form began to disintegrate. The darkness that had enveloped the village lifted, and the sky above cleared, revealing the stars once more. With a final burst of energy, the light from the staff surged forward, enveloping the Shadow King in a cocoon of pure white. The villagers watched in awe as the dark figure was consumed by the light, its power dissipating into nothingness. The ground trembled one last time, and then all was still. The Shadow King was gone. The village of Yumidike was saved. Kaito, exhausted but victorious, lowered the staff. The glowing stones in the grove dimmed, their light fading as the energy of the ancestors returned to rest. Ifunanya and Adana released their grip on Kaito, their faces etched with relief and gratitude. The villagers emerged from the council hut, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and joy. They gathered around Kaito, Ifunanya, and Adana, offering their thanks and praise. Chief Obina stepped forward, his eyes filled with pride. "You have saved us," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "The ancestors will forever remember this night." Kaito, though weary, smiled. "It was not I alone," he replied. "It was the strength of this village, the unity of its people, and the power of the ancestors that brought us victory." The villagers cheered, their voices echoing through the night. The battle was over, and the darkness had been vanquished. Yumidike had survived, stronger and more united than ever before. In the days that followed the battle, the village of Yumidike began the process of healing and rebuilding. The damage caused by the dark forces was extensive, but the villagers, united by their shared ordeal, worked together to restore what had been lost. Homes were repaired, crops were replanted, and the livestock that had survived were tended to with care. Chief Obina and the council organized a series of ceremonies to honor the ancestors and give thanks for their protection. The villagers participated with renewed faith, their bond with the spirits of the land stronger than ever before. The grove, where the final battle had taken place, was declared a sacred site, and a monument was erected to commemorate the victory over the Shadow King. Kaito, though revered as a hero, remained humble. He continued to assist the villagers, offering his knowledge and skills wherever they were needed. But he also knew that his time in Yumidike was coming to an end. The village was safe now, and his journey was far from over. One evening, as the sun set over the village, Kaito stood at the edge of the grove, gazing at the monument that had been built. Ifunanya approached him, sensing that he was preparing to leave. "You're going, aren't you?" she asked, her voice tinged with sadness. Kaito nodded, a gentle smile on his face. "My work here is done," he said softly. "But there are other places that need my help. The balance must be maintained." Ifunanya looked down, struggling to find the words. She had grown close to Kaito, and the thought of him leaving filled her with a sense of loss. "Will we ever see you again?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kaito placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "The world is full of mysteries," he said. "But as long as you remember the lessons you've learned, and keep the spirits of the ancestors close, you will always have the strength to face whatever comes your way." Ifunanya nodded, her heart heavy but understanding the truth in his words. She watched as Kaito turned to leave, his figure slowly disappearing into the twilight. She knew that he was a wanderer, destined to protect and guide others, just as he had done for them. As the night fell, Ifunanya returned to the village, feeling a sense of peace. Kaito might be gone, but his presence would always be felt in Yumidike. The village had been changed forever, not just by the battle, but by the lessons of courage, unity, and trust that they had learned. And so, life in Yumidike continued, stronger and more resilient than ever before. The villagers knew that they would face challenges in the future, but they also knew that they had the strength and the spirit to overcome them. The memory of the mysterious stranger who had changed everything would live on in their hearts, a testament to the enduring power of hope and the unbreakable bond between the living and the spirits of the ancestors. Years passed, and the story of the mysterious stranger became legend in Umidike. The villagers told the tale to their children, who in turn passed it down to their own. The events of that fateful night, when the village stood united against the forces of darkness, became a cornerstone of the village's identity. Village of Umidike prospered in the years following the battle. The crops were bountiful, the livestock thrived, and the people lived in harmony, both with each other and with the spirits of the land. The monument in the sacred grove became a place of pilgrimage, where villagers and visitors alike would come to pay their respects to the ancestors and reflect on the lessons of the past. Chief Obina, now older and wiser, continued to lead the village with the same strength and compassion that had seen them through their darkest hour. Under his guidance, Umidike flourished, becoming known far and wide as a place of peace and prosperity. Elder Adana, having played a crucial role in the village's survival, was revered as a living link to the ancestors. She continued to serve as an advisor to the chief and the villagers, sharing her wisdom and ensuring that the old traditions were preserved. Her connection to the spirits remained strong, and she often led rituals in the grove, where the presence of the ancestors was felt most keenly. Ifunanya, who had once been a girl filled with curiosity and a thirst for knowledge, grew into a woman of great wisdom and strength. She became a respected leader in her own right, taking on the role of a spiritual guide for the younger generation. She taught them the importance of unity, courage, and respect for the ancestors, ensuring that the lessons learned during the battle with the Shadow King would never be forgotten. As the years went by, Ifunanya often found herself thinking of Kaito. His presence had left an indelible mark on her heart, and though she missed him, she knew that he was out there somewhere, helping others just as he had helped them. She took comfort in the knowledge that they had been blessed by his guidance and that his spirit would always watch over them. One day, many years after the battle, a group of travelers arrived in Umidike. They had heard stories of the village's legendary protector and had come to learn more about the mysterious stranger who had saved the village. The villagers welcomed them warmly, eager to share their history. The travelers were led to the monument in the sacred grove, where Ifunanya, now an elder herself, told them the story of Kaito and the battle with the Shadow King. As she spoke, the travelers listened in awe, captivated by the tale of bravery, unity, and the enduring power of the ancestors. When the story was finished, one of the travelers, a young man with bright eyes and an inquisitive nature, asked Ifunanya, "Do you think the mysterious stranger will ever return?" Ifunanya smiled, her eyes twinkling with wisdom. "The mysterious stranger is a guardian of the balance," she said. "He appears when he is needed most, and when his work is done, he moves on. But his spirit is always with us, in the wind, in the earth, and in the hearts of those who believe." The young man nodded, feeling a sense of peace. The travelers thanked the villagers for their hospitality and left, taking with them the story of Umidike and the mysterious stranger, to share with others far and wide. As the sun set over the village that evening, Ifunanya stood once more at the edge of the grove, looking out at the monument that had come to symbolize so much more than just a victory over darkness. It was a symbol of the strength and resilience of our people, of the power of unity and the enduring presence of the ancestors. And somewhere, in the quiet of the night, she felt the faintest whisper of a familiar presence, a gentle breeze that rustled the leaves and carried with it a sense of peace and protection. She closed her eyes and smiled, knowing that Kaito's spirit would always be with them, watching over Umidike and guiding them into the future. Far from Umidike, across vast plains and dense forest, Kaito walked a solitary path. The sun was setting on another distant land, casting long shadows on the ground as he made his way through an ancient, forgotten temple. The stones were worn with age, and the air was thick with the scent of incense and history. Kaito's journey had taken him far from the village he had saved, but the memories of Umedike remained close to his heart. He had traveled through many lands, aiding those in need, restoring balance where it had been lost, and quietly moving on when his work was done. His life was a continuous cycle of challenges and victories, of light and darkness. As he explored the temple, he felt a familiar sensation, a tingling in the air, a shift in the energy around him. He paused, closing his eyes, and listened to the whispers of the spirits. They spoke of a new danger, a looming threat that would require his intervention. The details were unclear, but the urgency was unmistakable. Kaito opened his eyes, his expression calm but determined. He knew what he had to do. The journey ahead would be long and difficult, but he was ready. The spirits had called upon him once more, and he would answer. He exited the temple and looked out at the horizon. The world stretched out before him, vast and full of mysteries yet to be uncovered. As the last rays of sunlight faded, Kaito set off on his new quest, his steps steady and purposeful. Somewhere, in the far distance, another village awaited his arrival. Another battle would be fought, another lesson would be learned, and the balance would be restored once more. The journey was endless, but Kaito knew that this was his destiny, to be the guardian of the balance, to protect those who could not protect themselves, and to move on when his work was done. And so, under the stars of an unfamiliar sky, Kaito walked into the night, ready for whatever lay ahead. I hope you enjoyed and learned something from this story. Please kindly like the video, comment your thoughts, and please subscribe for more enchanting tales. Thank you.